Good afternoon. This is the Urbana Arts and Culture Commission meeting conducted 100% virtually due to the Governor's Shelter-in-Place Order and Executive Order Number 5, the provisions of the Open Meetings Act 5 ILCS 120. In addition, Section 4 of the City of Urbana Temporary Emergency Ordinance to address the COVID-19 pandemic provides for meetings to be conducted electronically. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the city's website. Please note the chat function for this session has been disabled and all public will be muted. Public input can be provided during the public input part of the agenda. If you wish to speak during it, please use the button at the bottom right corner of your screen titled Raise Hand to be called upon. This function is located in the participant window. State your first and last name for the record. If you are phoning in and would like to speak, please use *9 to raise your hand. For each agenda item, after staff have presented or offered an update, Arts and Culture Commission members will have an opportunity to ask questions by raising hand to be called upon. Again, this function is located in the participant window in the bottom right corner of your screen. Okay. I'm calling the June 9th meeting of the Urbana Arts and Culture Commission to order. Can we have a roll call?
Yes. All right. Ms. Bex? Ms. Hedlund?
Present.
Mr. Miller?
Present.
Mr. Modica? There he is. Ms. Orcherton? Mr. Pania?
Present.
Ms. Salmon?
Here.
And Ms. Williams? Oh, there she is. Okay, cool.
Present. Sorry.
Okay, we have quorum. Next up is approval of minutes of the May 12th, 2020 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Okay, all opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. Do we have any additions to the agenda? Rachel? Okay, and we don't have any input from the public, I don't believe. So Rachel, why don't you go ahead with the staff report?
Great, I'm gonna share my screen, folks. So bear with me just a moment. I see what happened. This is the problem of having too many windows open at once. All right, here we are. Is everyone able to see that? We're gonna get going.
Yep.
So this is our June 2020 staff report. I'm gonna begin by kind of just giving a continued update on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on our programs and events. As has been the case, we have suspended many of our, or postponed many of our in-person events, and actually at this point, all of our in-person events, and then had some postponements. We've also been working remotely since mid-March. Staff are continuing to work remotely. There is an effort underway to have staff eventually sort of return in a measured and slow way back to office. So that's certainly part of the conversation happening right now, but for the time being, staff continue to work remotely in our program. We have had some events successfully be transformed into virtual formats, and I will be talking about those a little later in the presentation. And we have been working consistently to share relief information, resources for local artists, and various initiatives, including forging new initiatives where possible in partnership with other organizations as well. I want to take a moment to talk specifically about staffing. If you follow us on social media, you may have seen a release that went out about our summer arts and culture internship. So we are hiring 2 local high schoolers through the Illinois Arts Council Summer Youth Employment Grant. And we're able to have those students be also working remotely for the time being. We're accepting applications for the next couple of weeks, and then we'll do interviews and have them begin probably right around the beginning of July and work for the remainder of the summer. This has been on a little bit of a delay with everything going on, but we will be able to accommodate them meeting their hours, and they'll be able to work remotely on a number of projects related to what we've been able to continue to do, as well as some emerging things. I've also been our Urbana Arts and Culture program has been designated a site for the Community Engaged Scholars Program through the University of Illinois. This is a collaboration of a number of departments at the university, including the School of Social Work, the College of Education, and I think 3 or 4 others. We See You is the name of the program, and through this effort, we are going to have a couple of small groups of students. There was a funny faux pas here in which I suggested I could have multiple students, and they thought I meant multiple groups of students. So we have a few interns coming our way, but they have been designated to work on different aspects of program needs that I have made clear in the application process. So I'm confident that we'll be able to assign them some work that will be fruitful for them. Some of the things that they were specifically, well, this program was specifically designed to address emerging needs during COVID-19. So we have reached out. This was applied quite a while ago, and when we originally applied, we talked a lot about cold calling artists, sharing relief information. So there's a group that wants to kind of continue to support artists and get information out. There's another need that we've had about translating our documents and all of our programmatic materials. And so we have another group that will work specifically on Spanish, Mandarin, and French translation service for us. So there's going to be some, I think, really fruitful things that'll come out of collaborating with this program. But wanted to make sure that you're very aware of that. And then we also are working with the Care for You program. And so I have had a student now sent to me for an interview for that program. That is a high school student. So if you're doing the math, we have a few different graduate and undergraduate students who will be working on very specific projects remotely. And they'll be just assigned work as on an sort of as needed basis. And then we'll have 2 students paid through the Illinois Arts Council grant that will have more consistent work coming to them, and then 1 student in the Care for You program that will work with those other 2 high schoolers. So quite a few people coming in to do some work, and we'll be working on just kind of giving them some consistent support remotely, having regular meetings, and otherwise getting them onboarded as much as we can in a time when we're not in the office. To take a moment just to update Urbana Arts and Culture program. Again, we've got arts grants pretty well underway. Nearly all, I think minus 2 or 3 now have all received their initial checks and have confirmed with us that they have. So things are looking bright there. Thank you to Heather Ann again for all of her work on helping get all of those things processed, requisitions made, and checks out. That has been fabulous, and she's been doing a really great job with tracking, and we're also just working on wrapping up those 2019 folks as well, some of whom had been at a standstill because of the shelter-in-place order and having March events. So we're working on that next, but we're very excited about how healthy the grant program is looking. And then, of course, later on in the agenda, I want to take some time to specifically talk to you about Tier 3. I want to mention Art in a Time of Quarantine. This was brought up at the last couple of meetings that we've had. This is our county-wide arts, youth arts exhibition done online, but also with the help of, thank you, Jason, from Urbana Public Television, also turning that into a video that will air on TV and on our YouTube channel with Urbana Public TV. So students submitted different artworks from across the county on various grade and age levels, all interpreting this time of quarantine, this political moment, this historic moment, and we've gotten some really wonderful submissions. We, in light of all of the important work being done right now around addressing systemic racism and around paying a lot of attention to amplifying Black voices during this time, we elected to withhold the kind of release of this. It's not exactly a release celebration because some of the artworks aren't, I would argue, weren't celebratory to begin with, but certainly to highlight the students that submitted, we've decided to delay that. So we are hopefully going to have that happen later on this Thursday. But in general, have wanted to take a few days to sort of, in deference to this political moment, kind of suspend the activities that were going on there. I want to mention a couple of things that are continue to be virtual efforts going on. In particular, our Monday Art Inspired with the Urbana Free Library. We're highlighting local artists, and we've included now some short sort of advice from local artists, as well as what inspires them. A little bit more about the artists themselves and their artwork are all displayed each Monday in collaboration with the Urbana Free Library through social media channels. Also a new and emerging collaboration between Spurlock Museum and 40 North Champaign County Arts Council is more of an effort that's under development right now, and that is to create some installation calls for artists for our areas, walkway areas, and that includes things like parks, and we're exploring community gardens as potential sites for artwork. And this is just an example, which actually comes from Art Park installation in East Haddam, Connecticut. But I wanted to kind of give you a visual to think about. What we're hoping to do is to kind of create other opportunities for artists to first of all have an opportunity to have their artwork be featured in a public way that's also safe for viewing at this time. So we're going to be working with the Park District, 40 North, with some of the leaders of community gardens, and with Spurlock Museum. And Spurlock Museum is actually the financial supporter on this particular project. So they are approached the rest of us about coming up with a project like this where they could actually fund the artists through honorariums and things. So we're excited about that. I'll have plenty more information to give you at next month's meeting. I want to talk to you a lot about, well, one thing that doesn't have a slide in connection with it, but is another kind of emerging project, is and it does involve our poet laureate, is an overarching poetry initiative throughout the Champaign-Urbana area, but particularly the Urbana area, in collaboration with the library and the Park District. And so we have a number of projects that have been in some ways delayed, postponed, or otherwise impacted by the shelter-in-place order. And Poet Laureate Will Rieger will now be collaborating with the library, with the Park District, to offer, to kind of pull together workshops and efforts to share poetry, as well as the Postcard Poetry Project and a teen showcase. So we already had those things underway. The Park District wanted to do a project around poetry. We all shared what's been going on in our various worlds about poetry, and it was determined that we could actually collaborate to make some of the things that we've had to postpone happen, and happen perhaps in alternative formats. So that's an exciting development. I'll have a lot more information about that, but there will effectively be an umbrella of programs that fall underneath poetry initiatives in Urbana that involve our Poet Laureate. So kind of moving along right to in the report where we talk about the Poet Laureate in particular, Will Rieger, as we know, has had to cancel a number of his in-person events and things, but we've actually been able to add quite a bit. So since last meeting, some of the things that have changed is we had discussed that poets on a park bench would be hopefully converted into a Zoom-based thing. We are currently underway with that, so we very recently were able to call out for some quotes for videographers, and in part that comes from us having the privilege and the benefit of working with Urbana Public Television in the past, and lots of props and support for Jason right now, who's on this call doing lots of the organizing of this particular webinar, but also all of the ways in which he's been pulled now in the direction of having to really help facilitate some of these technology things for the city. And then also being under a hiring freeze for the city of Urbana has meant that he's not been able to hire on new people to assist with many of the already very stretched workload that the Urbana Public Television Office does. So one thing that we are doing is working to use our existing resources to actually pay a videographer to help us with the editing process, to be able to do a Poets in a Pandemic version of Poets on a Park Bench, where it would be a Zoom-based interview with local artists, local poets, and the Poet Laureate. Our very own Frank Modica was one of the people that was interviewed, and was his interview was just a little bit disrupted by a marching band. when we tried his Poets on a Park Bench. So he is actually our first feature. So we're excited to work with him and in some ways maybe work within some of the footage that worked from that original interview and then combine it with some more Zoom-based footage for our first episode. And it will be a really fun episode in a way because I think it'll help show that transition between the park bench and the TV Zoom-based series in a very literal way. So we're excited about that feature. Again, things moving forward on the postcard poetry project, on Poems on Glass. So Will Rieger's still doing the request a poem thing where you can contact him personally to his email, and anyone in the community can request a poem written for them. He's written, I think something, as of yesterday, he said over 40 some poems, and he is hoping to reach 100. And they're increasing with much more rapidness now because the word's getting out about that. He's also going to be featured in the Urbana-Champaign Independent Media Center's Sounds Like Community series coming up. He'll have a young artist studio workshop, and he'll be doing a teen poetry workshop with the library, all of which will be opportunities where we will encourage people to submit their poetry for publication and all the other various initiatives that we're doing. So he's been busy, in other words, and if you have time, please send him an email, yes, for a poem, but you can also just let him know, that we appreciate all the ways in which he's moving forward during this time of shelter in place with all the projects he's wanted to do. And I'll just go through these quickly. These were some of the initiatives we mentioned. Next up, I want to talk to you specifically about Young Artist Studio. So we had our most recent, this was one of our converted programs. We're doing these entirely virtually. These are our kids' art lessons held once a month. Our very first one featured Thomas Nickel of Pens, one of the founders of Pens to Lens, teaching kids how to make stop motion films with like Legos and a couple of cameras set up, and it was really, really brilliant and engaging. And I have 2 kids I know of that have already made stop motion films, and their parents have shared them with me, so that's very exciting. Our second one is going to feature Poet Laureate Will Rieger. We've had these on the calendar for a while now, so we're working with everybody who's signed up to give them in our lineup to make sure that they are easy to convert into a virtual format. And these are, again, for kids 5 and up. So that will take place on Sunday, June 21st at 3 p.m. Just want to acknowledge that since our last meeting, more formal guidance came out. Urbana's Downtown Get Down, in accordance with Restore Illinois 5-stage plan to reopen, and the City of Urbana's extension of the suspension of special event permits through September 7th is going to be canceled in its entirety. Instead, all the partners, we work together on a number of other projects, and we continue to kind of think of other ways to activate downtown to help support creative placemaking and to continue programming. But the actual format of Urbana's Downtown Get Down will not take place as it has been in the last year. We encourage people to give us feedback, and of course are looking to always create new and exciting events within the constraints that we have. Similarly, our Market in the Square concerts continue to be postponed. You may have heard that the City of Urbana is now allowing live music by permit for folks who are also doing outdoor dining. So that is within the constraints of outdoor dining. So a dine-in, chairs are set apart, tables are set 6 feet apart from each other, not in a sort of gathering type way where we could dance or otherwise engage with the music in ways that maybe we're accustomed to, but that you will be seeing more and more live music popping up, and we are of course exploring how this might impact other things that we've had to postpone, including our farmers market concerts. We're still in the works of getting this on display, but I wanted to leave it up here because it is old business that hasn't been wrapped up, but we are going to be installing our Murals on Glass selection for this year. And last but not least, I wanted to acknowledge that the COVID-19 artist resource list continues to be something that we keep our eye on. At present, there have not been additional relief program dates and deadlines that are are upcoming. So we continue to share out the Americans for the Arts COVID-19 Relief Guide and other information to people who request it. This does include private relief efforts. It includes federal and state efforts when they're available. But a lot of deadlines at this point have passed, and we're sort of awaiting figuring out if there's going to be more monies made available. And I'll certainly pass that along as soon as I know more. And that is the end of today's staff report.
Okay,
Any
thank you, Rachel.
questions?
Could I jump in real quick?
Mhm.
I just wanted to make an announcement that this will be my last Arts and Culture Commission meeting. I'm going to be wrapping up service with the City of Urbana at the end of the month. My appointment has not been renewed by the mayor, and I just wanted to say it's been a real pleasure serving with you all and all the great work that's been accomplished. And kudos to Rachel and Heather Ann on all the work they've been doing, as you just heard in the staff report.
Well, we thank you, Brandon, for your service and wish you all the best in your new adventures to come, plus your new family, extension of your family.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Brandon. I've known you for a long time. I really appreciate all the work you've put in for this commission. Okay, let's go ahead. Rachel, I think you wanted to talk a little bit about the COVID-19 impact on Urbana's arts and culture program.
Did we call for public input?
Yes.
Okay. I just didn't hear that call. I thought we just jumped straight into the report.
Okay. Well, I had just said that I didn't believe that we had any public input, but I'm sorry if you missed that.
Okay. I had just seen that Seth and Patrick were both attending the meeting, so I didn't know if they were here for public input or if they were here for an agenda item.
Rachel, did you know if they wanted to say anything?
I don't personally, but I think it would make sense if we want to just invite that at this time.
Okay, sure. Yeah, if anyone has public input and would like to speak now, please let us know.
Hello.
Hi, Seth.
I don't necessarily have anything to add, just to say thank you again for all of the work that you're putting in here. It's nice to get updates, and Brandon, obviously, I'm obviously very sorry to hear that you're not going to be a part of the City of Urbana's team any longer. I wasn't going to have a drink tonight. I'm going to have one now. That's what's going to happen. Outside of that, I'll take direction here as far as when you get to the Tier 3 discussion. That's what Patrick and I are obviously here to hear about. So thank you again for being here and doing all this great work as a volunteer service to the community. It's real important. So thank you.
Okay. Did Patrick want to say anything, or? Okay. Okay, go ahead then, Rachel. Did you have anything particular you wanted to say about the COVID impact on Urbana's arts and culture program? I have that as the next item.
Yeah, not more than what I included in my report at this time.
Okay, then we can move along to Tier 3 grant guidance, if you want to talk about that.
Excellent. So to give us all a little bit of background and just bring us all kind of to the same place, last month's meeting, which did get postponed and we had to meet a little bit later in the month, so it feels like we just had this conversation, we talked a little bit about what we've been doing to gather feedback and information from Tier 3 grantees to better understand what these 4 organizations are planning, how they're thinking about the current response to the pandemic on event planners and their own teams. And we wanted to take that feedback as well as solicit your feedback, which we did at last month's meeting, and really combine all of that into a proposal for your review. This is still a proposal that needs to have it's not going to be voted upon here. It's not something that the commission makes a decision or vote on, but it's something that I want to present to you to get your feedback on before then we go to verify that this is something that we can move forward on with the city staff in sort of a finalized way. But we're really just trying to create some guidance for how folks who really represent those who do large-scale events can address their own event planning and can move forward during this time. So that's the spirit that this comes to you through. I'm going to share my screen to share the document. And I also want to share with you that all of the feedback that was given to me from our 4 2020 Tier 3 grantees, I would love to send to you. Please do consider it a draft document. Their needs are evolving all the time. It absolutely should be treated that way. But I do want to share it with you at our commission. So I'll be emailing that to you after this meeting just so that you can view it as well. But I'm going to pull up the document that we drafted that kind of shares some information of a proposal for a way forward. So let me share my screen just a quick moment. Okay, are you able to see this? Okay.
Yes.
Excellent, thanks everyone. So these are drafted guidance for those in the Tier 3 category. So I'm just gonna read this off to you. In light of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Urbana Arts and Culture Program seeks to meet the shifting needs and priorities of all Urbana Arts Grant recipients. In particular, those most impacted by the Restore Illinois 5-stage plan to reopen and the City of Urbana's extension of the suspension of special event permits through September 7th. So in that spirit, the following proposal for Tier 3 Urbana Arts Grant recipients seeks to ensure flexibility, adaptability, and support for grant recipients as they navigate the unique challenges of large-scale event planning in the midst of this evolving COVID-19 pandemic response. So as I said before, this proposal takes into consideration your feedback from the last commission meeting, as well as the feedback of Tier 3 grantees themselves and City of Urbana fund use constraints, which is something I want to particularly emphasize because our Tier 3 grants are funded through our TIF funding, and we want to make sure too, by and large, there is a portion of that funding that isn't, but by and large they are, and so the intention behind these grants, of course, is to create large-scale gathering and to offer creative placemaking and economic development in our downtown TIF. So that's something that is a constraint that we also want to make sure that the proposals and of how to move forward reflect well. So in recognition of this, we proposed kind of 3 different options. The first one is adapting the event format itself. So we're suggesting that grantees can adapt in-person events by limiting attendance, especially once in the Restore Illinois Phase 4, which limits up to 50 people to gather, changing dates or times, and or partially converting projects to virtual formats. Please note the emphasis here is on partially. We ask that Tier 3 grant events must include some in-person component. For virtual components, significant effort should be made to collaborate with and promote venues within downtown Urbana in recognition of the original intent of these grants. So that is something that we mean to say that all of these grants were funded on the promise that they were working with downtown venues. And there was even some information, I know many of them, that was very specific about which venues. And so we're hoping and intending for that to continue, and for some way in which these events, if made virtual, are still very tethered to Urbana and really impact Urbana in tangible and material ways. We're also asking that then grantees would be then encouraged to work in consultation with the Urbana Arts and Culture Coordinator, me, to devise strategies to ensure economic impact and kind of think about how that could be possible. Grantees are also able to request an extension of their grant period through contacting the Arts and Culture Coordinator. All of this to really support that we know that even the phased plan is a very evolving situation. And so we know that more time may be necessary in order to make this possible. The other option is the deferral of grant monies to the 2021 grant cycle. we're suggesting that grantees who are unable to adapt their events within financial or organizational constraints before the grant period extension deadline can elect to defer their grant monies to the 2021 grant cycle. Grantees will still be eligible to apply for additional 2021 grant funding in the Tier 3 category, but their deferral may be taken into consideration in the grant making process, and grantees must demonstrate additional qualifying budgetary needs when they apply. We, of course, anticipate that there could be a great number of additional budgetary needs, especially as we move forward in the aftermath even of a pandemic and the things like health and safety or other needs that could arise. We want to really emphasize a couple of restrictions that continue. And one of these is that Tier 3 grants, as we all know, are dispersed on a reimbursement basis. Therefore, all budget changes must be submitted for approval prior to the event, and grantees will only be reimbursed for documented eligible expenses after the completion of an event. We also remind that if moving forward with any adapted in-person events, grantees are expected to work closely with the City of Urbana, the Champaign-Urbana Public Health Department to ensure COVID-19 health and safety compliance, as well as thoughtful planning in accordance with approved special event permitting and the governor's order. This may include some of the same things that are asked in the permit for outdoor seating, things like contact tracing, limiting gathering size, sanitation planning, and the like. So we're expecting that folks would work very directly with our public health department and our city. Last but not least, it's just a note that all requests for deferrals, for extensions, revised budgets, and or revised timelines should be sent to the Arts and Culture Coordinator via email and should include basically a revised budget if necessary. Extension requests are reviewed by the Arts and Culture Coordinator in consultation with city staff for approval. And that is really what we want to do just in terms of reiterating reminders of how the program typically works. The other thing to note is that by and large, while this focuses on Tier 3, all of our smaller tiers, which is our Tier 1 and Tier 2 grants, are going to be first and foremost encouraged to adhere to the adaptation guidance that we have given out. There will not be an automatic deferral of grant monies or that option presented as readily. We want to make sure that we have in the other tier categories more of a focus on adaptation and conversion of events. Many of the other tier categories are going to be able to do that with a little bit greater ease than our large scale events and festivals. So I'd like to at this time take any questions, comments, responses, feedback.
I've got just a bit of feedback. Rachel, this is great. I think you took strong consideration of the requests made by the committee, and I'm happy to see that we're going to give folks the option to defer, even with those increased costs and everything else. And everybody can say hello to my cat, who's joining me. But yeah, no, this looks good. I'd be, of course, interested to hear if this is meeting needs of Tier 3 folks. Do you have feedback from them that you can share with us?
Yes, so I am able to share kind of an overview of feedback if that's desirable.
Sure, that's fine.
Sure, is that, should we do that now or take additional questions before I do that?
I have a question. Rachel, I'm just curious about sort of the timeline and process to make a decision. So I understand we're not voting, kind of just talking about the document. Yeah, is there sort of a time frame, or can you share with us like the process of how the final decision is going to be made about?
Yeah, so time is of the essence, of course. The folks who are planning large scale events, most of these events take place in the end of summer, early fall. And actually the only one that doesn't is Boneyard, which technically already took place. And so their needs are all a little different, but it is important, I think, to give guidance as early as possible. From my, what I hope to do is get your feedback here, gather again feedback from our Tier 3 grantees, and then also, of course, take this before our city staff to get final approval internally from the city. But I think that in my first my first hunch based on all the feedback so far that we've gotten, and I know even for planners of these events, things may have already started to shift and change from when they gave me initial feedback, that there is an option going forward that meets the needs of everybody in what is stated here. Yeah. Other questions before I share some initial feedback? If not, I'm just going to pull that feedback up really quickly because I accidentally closed it.
Rachel, you haven't shared that draft document with us, have you?
No.
Okay. I was just trying to see if it was in any of this stuff, and I didn't see it.
Is it possible to have both of those up? Sorry, I'm kind of visual more than auditory. I kind of
to pull back up the
draft. Yeah, but not
draft.
with the feedback. You probably can't. Yeah, the screen probably can't do both. But okay, that's all right.
You know what? What I can do is, actually, here's a thought. Heather Ann, if you're on the call, would you be willing to pull up the feedback and share it out, and I will pull up the guidelines for people to be able to look at simultaneously?
Thank you. Thank you.
And Heather Ann, I'm thinking largely like I can kind of jump in with you to explain, because I'm not sure that we need to go over them in their entirety because it's a lot of information. But just maybe you can have it up in reference, and I try to just off the top of my head share it out, and you can correct anything that needs correction.
So I actually have it on a different computer. So
Okay.
You gotta give me a second.
No worries. I'm going to share this back again. I'll do a screen share so folks can see at least the guidance one more time. Okay. Are you all able to see that?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go down to the actual accommodations here.
Okay.
Here we go.
So let me just begin by saying everybody in Tier 3 have different types of events that they're running, impacted differently by special event permitting. Some need special event permits, such as Sweet Corn Festival and Pygmalion. Others don't use street closures and things, such as CU Folk and Roots and our Boneyard Arts Festival. So the needs are also different, and that's important to acknowledge. By and large, what our understanding is right now is almost everyone is in the position of exploring some adapted in-person something or other, and some adapted virtual something or other. So some sort of hybrid of both things. The one distinction is that Sweet Corn Festival has decided that for the most part, any sort of in-person is unlikely to happen at all. So they already made a formal cancellation, and they were exploring other options for perhaps a virtual festival or other things. But, you know, one of the things that's most important is for all of these folks in their considerations is, of course, the financial viability of those options. Right now, largely Sweet Corn Festival or Urbana Business Association is more exploring a kind of commemorative thing where there will be some virtual performances during the day, and more of a commemorating the historic moment and the fact that Sweet Corn has such a long history. So sort of an honoring of Sweet Corn Festival, but not a festival, and not a virtual festival, and not necessarily something that is even conducted partially in person on a limited attendance basis. That said, they're all, really, we're all evolving here in terms of like the needs from one moment to the next. So I think that it's possible, and it's maybe accurate to say that at this time, all four are considering some version of a hybrid in-person virtual arrangement. So we have, for instance, Boneyard Arts Festival that did a virtual campaign and project and sort of a virtual version of Boneyard Arts Festival in April when its original dates were underway. Boneyard's also looking to potentially do a in-person limited attendance based Boneyard Arts Festival this fall. And that also will be reflected by, and is you know, in some ways a lot more possible than a Sweet Corn Festival done in the same way, because Boneyard is already a venue-based event where venues can limit attendance with greater ease. In contrast, we have things like Sweet Corn Festival, which have used street closures, 2-day-long event, lot different in terms of need. Then we have things like Pygmalion, which are exploring partial virtual versions, partial in-person with limited attendance. And then we have CU Folk and Roots that has largely been inside our local venues and can limit attendance kind of more similarly to Boneyard Arts Festival. We may be able to do that. And that's, of course, all dependent on reaching phase 4. And, you know, all of these things are also dependent on, you know, not having to go backwards in phases, but only forward and linearly. So there's a lot up in the air for everyone working to plan events. And my goal with this draft guidance was really to try to err on the side of flexibility and err on the side of adaptability, err on the side of encouraging our grantees to work directly with me and with the city and with the existing supports to come up with plans that are fun and innovative and will still allow things to happen. Because the other thing is that we want this to happen. You know, we want as much as possible continued activity in the realm of arts and culture. We know that it's such a healing force in the world that we need more arts and culture at every turn. So that's the other thing that's a motivator here is making sure that we make whatever is possible. But, you know, there's a lot more within that I can say, and the feedback I'll send you gives a lot more detail. Every single one of our Tier 3 grantees took thoughtful time to compile some feedback to let us know some of the innovative ways they're thinking about doing things. I'm excited to see what that kind of looks like. I know Seth's on our call, and I was excited to see him say that he's I think Seth, you used the word, we're gonna come up with some demented other kinds of unusual, like just, you know, really different ways of doing things that that will help make, you know, a lot of things possible. And I see Seth's raising his hand. I'm not sure if we can take public comment at this time. Of course, I'd err on the possibility of allowing it, but yeah, I think there's just a lot that I think the creativity is flowing, and that's what we continue to want to nurture, and we want to make sure that these speak to the needs of those they impact.
Rachel, just one quick point. You know, if we're going to vote on approving the document, we could always add language into it that says, you know, this is not definitive nor final nor determinative of the final outcome of the 2020 grant recipients and what we do with their programs due to the pandemic and its ever-evolving situation, or just something along those lines. You know, just to kind of make it clear that we understand that we're saying these things, but we may need to ultimately do something else.
I just wonder if there's a way we can kind of respond and sort of like respect the seriousness of the COVID issue and how that's going to affect other people's attendance. So even if we're saying, you know, if we're limiting attendance, saying a smaller number, that doesn't, I don't know, just feels less public, obviously. And there are some people in the community who won't be able to risk like participating. So I don't know what that means, and I don't know how to fix it, but just kind of like holding those concerns. How do we reach populations who are like more vulnerable or at risk and don't want to be in public spaces?
Right, and that certainly makes me think too about the request for some sort of hybrid, like if there is some sort of in-person event, it doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility to request that then be broadcast, or maybe that there's, you know, some effort made, especially on the things that we fund, to ensure that they're public as much as possible. Other
just
feedback?
a note too, just that Jared mentioned voting on the document. this is still under presentation, so it's not really a business item for the commission. It's just an opportunity to give feedback to staff. The awards were awarded, and we've entered into contracts, and we're looking for guidance on how staff should basically manage those contracts moving forward. And the authority of that derives from the administration. So just to be clear, you don't need to be concerned about wordsmithing it, and anything you share with us, we'll try to get integrated into the response, and we can continue to adapt that as needed as time goes on, or we hear back more from our grant recipients.
One thing, Jared, your comment made me think of too is, and I think we do this to a degree in the guidelines as they exist, but really making clear how people can request support for evolving needs and who they can direct those questions to. And I think that's largely me as the arts and culture coordinator, but I can make that also more explicit, that we understand needs are evolving, that, this isn't a linear situation, and it's very hard right now to really anticipate future needs. So just making very clear where people can lay those concerns and how we will go about addressing them. And kind of, again, just emphasizing that we're erring on the side of flexibility as much as possible right now.
I got you, and totally recognize that, Brandon. I know I'm just a suggestion. That was just guidance on, including that language. But I would request that the chair recognize Seth so he can tell us what's on his mind.
Mm-hmm.
One more question. Well, if certain projects choose to delay some kind of portion, is that going to affect next year's competition? Or probably, I understand if you don't know, but like if there's like a rollover of funds?
So my anticipation is if somebody chooses to roll over their funds, that they will likely still apply again next year. And if they can demonstrate, additional financial budgetary needs and eligible expenses, I would imagine that you all as the Arts Commission would certainly take those into consideration. I always was, I'm anticipating that we're going to have more and more people apply into Tier 3 every year. I have people saying to me, every year, the past 2 years that we've had this tier, I've had people say to me, hey, I really plan to apply for Tier 3 next year. But this pandemic itself is going to have a lot of impact on arts organizations, including those that were kind of building festivals that were growing bigger. So it's really hard to anticipate for certain what our applications will look like next year. I'm not so much worried about us being inundated as much as us making sure that we're supporting in the ways that are possible, because we can also, because we hold now Tier 3 at a different time period as in relation to the rest of the grants, that also allows us the opportunity of people, if they are not funded for any reason in Tier 3, to apply in 1 or 2 for a smaller portion, but still substantial amount of funding. And for the history of the arts program, even our Tier 2 represents some of our most highly funded grant projects. So these are, by and large, smaller grants, but certainly Tier 3 represents our biggest category. Pat, are we able to allow Seth a moment to speak?
Certainly, as long as that's permissible. Since it's not in public input, but I'm fine with that if you want to recognize him. Do I need to do anything here?
No, Seth is unmuted, so he should be able to talk now. Go ahead, Seth.
I just want to wait my turn.
Go ahead, Seth.
Thank you for giving me the chance to speak. It's again, this is all very illuminating, and Rachel, thank you for taking into consideration the things that we had written to you, and this is, I did use the word demented because I think it's a demented moment, and I mean that in the most playful way. I don't know how to say it. It's just like everything's turned on its head. And for somebody who's been doing Pygmalion now for 16 years and presenting even longer, performing even longer than that, it all is like, All right, hard to wrap your head around it. But I have a question, and then I'll make a couple of comments if it's okay with everyone.
Yeah, go ahead.
In particular, Miss Williams brought up a really good point, something that Pygmalion is really considerate of. But first, the question is, Rachel, do you have any sense of, in the flexibility portion of the funding, as far as adjusting what we were going to do to virtual events versus making some of it live? I live by a train, and here it comes. I'm sorry. It won't take long. It's a very slow-moving train that I believe my son could probably push back, but it's going to make some beeps across
You're
Prospect. Okay. That should be it. There's usually 4. Yeah, is there any sense of, well, how much of the grant needs to be spent on in-person events versus virtual events? I think that's probably a discussion that you and I and Patrick and whomever else will have individually. Look, right now, I'll give you a short story here so I don't take up too much of your time, but look, we don't really know how to do anything except get to work. I mean, we kind of already mourned. We've, 5-staged our year in a lot of ways because we're do in-person live engaging events. The whole concept is to bring people together to celebrate our community and the artists that live here and to showcase ourselves as a platform for bigger artists from elsewhere. Well, that's over. We knew that pretty quickly. And when we wanted to give ourselves a chance to breathe, to figure out, well, what's going on in the rest of the world and how do we take cues and learn about it? And something dawned on us actually in this really odd and kind of fun way is that, Pygmalion has for a long time not been a live, primarily even a live music event. I mean, I know that I'm making light of this at this moment, but last year, one of our biggest events at Krannert Center was a man making a salad on stage, okay? And Anthony Porowski from Queer Eye coming to talk to people about his life and engaging with Michelle Zahner from Japanese Breakfast. And entertainment has continued to shift throughout the course of human history, and it's shifting again. It's accelerating now as a result of a pandemic, but we've long been engaged in thinkers and lectures and podcasts and comedians and a hackathon and a human library and a maker's fair and all of these different components that are put on live, but now can be adapted into the virtual space. There's some things that we very much believe cannot work well in a virtual space. And for us, and not for others, but for us, it's live streaming of concerts. That's not really something we wish to do, unless you're talking about an audience being passive. Like, I would love to potentially do some sort of engagement with an orchestra, with a symphony, where the audience is there to sit and engage and listen, but they're not like dancing and up front, right? But for the type of stuff we traditionally do, we need an active participant audience. If we hire a comedian with no laughter, I mean, how are they going to know whether the bit's working? It's not going to work. But there are so many things that we can pursue. There's topical Q&A. There's film screenings with guests to talk about that afterwards and to ask our audience to participate. There's virtual immersive theater, something that I participated in a couple of weeks ago that kind of mixes the idea of a virtual escape room with performance, whether that's aerial arts or kabuki theater. I mean, there's just so much to explore. A hackathon is already virtual. Now, granted, traditionally, it is people sitting in a room together, drinking Mountain Dew and getting smelly over 48 hours. But the whole thing is already virtual. It's already just virtual. Mm-hmm. A human library, you could tell me a story, and in some ways, a Zoom experience can be very intimate and very powerful. So there's all of these different things that we can do that are still impactful and are still meaningful and showcase the prowess of Champaign-Urbana, showcase the prowess of our community, and even showcase the prowess of our Urbana venues and partnering with them in unique ways that promote what it is that they did and what it is that they're going to do as we adjust. So we all kind of really inspired all of a sudden. What really tipped me off is I got a friend that I grew up with here in Urbana who lives in Tokyo. He's an architect, for one of the great firms in Japan. And forever, he can't come to Pygmalion because he lives in Japan and he got a kid. And, you know, but he's a programmer and a coder as well. And we were talking about the idea of the hackathon. He was just like, well, you know, could I do the hackathon? I'm like, well, yeah, sure, why not? He goes, well, God, looks like I'm coming to Pygmalion. And then all of a sudden, the next day, he was like, I talked to my team. Everyone wants to do it. So now all of a sudden, there's like 30 kids in Tokyo that like want to be involved. And all of a sudden, the parameters of our limitations before have opened up into this new way. Does it mean that we're going to change it for the future, for all time? I don't think so. But I think that there could be a hybridization of what we're doing that will lend itself well. We think about the MadeFest. We've been talking about it, and it's like, okay, so we can't all get together and buy stuff in person, but we can certainly create a virtual cube with all these different vendors, and then you can encourage them and invite them into demo making hours, Q&As between the different vendors and patrons, bring people in from outside of the community that are in that space that can talk to people. I mean, why can't Page Roasting Company showcase how to, you know, do roast coffee, but with like a coffee roaster from like, you know, Chicago or Amsterdam. I mean, anywhere. It's just this opportunity, I think, to like really expand on what the future of entertainment is going to look like. It doesn't mean that we're going to abandon or that we should abandon what we've always been dedicated to, but it's this like radical new space to just explore. I mean, I'm talking about video gaming that is interactive, immersive theater. We're talking about an online poker charity tournament, you know, where we get people that are well known. I mean, that's the fun of it, is like if you can get like, so the good example here is Steve Albini, who's this unbelievable record producer out of Chicago. He produced Nirvana's last album, Pixies, Bossa Nova. He's a legendary producer. But he's also a World Series of Poker bracelet holder. He won 7-card stud at Vegas. So how do you get him into the same poker game with these other thinkers and authors? How do you get an author who's also a musician and an engineer who's also an author to do these very interesting things? Look, I'll share this with you all, and it's for public record. It's coming out with Cranard anyway. But one of the things we had booked this year was a live film screening of the movie Napoleon Dynamite, which, you know, is a fun movie. That's a great anti-hero tale of the modern moment. And Napoleon and Pedro and Uncle Rico, we're all going to be there. They're all going to be on site for Q&A and talking about the movie and how it impacted everything, and that's all great. But that's the type of thing you can still kind of do. I mean, you can just watch the movie or not, and then you can zoom into a conversation with these people that you love. And as the agent said, he was like, well, now we could probably invite the whole cast. Not doing anything, you know, they're all in quarantine. So it opens up this space. And so as you continue to consider what it is this grant means to programmers, I mean, for us, going back to Miss Williams' comment, look, I live with an immunocompromised wife. She's shooting herself up with Humira, like, you know, and we're just not playing around. I got in a 79-year-old pop. I want to see him. I don't want to go and I want to eat at Bunny's, but I'm not going to right now. I'm just not going to risk it. And for some people, look, that's America and this is liberty, and I'm not going to have this discussion about what's right and wrong. I know for me and my family, we're going to stick to the science and wait this out, see what's going on. And so we're a little reticent to do anything in person because we don't want to leave anyone out. And we don't want to encourage people to do something that they may not feel safe doing. I think there's probably some opportunity, but we're also very singularly focused right now is how do we build the most progressive and interesting virtual event that showcases Urbana and Champaign-Urbana in a way. Look, we've been at the centerpiece of, you know, social media. Plato Systems built social media, online payments, MRI, LED, graphical web browser. Why can't Champaign-Urbana lead the charge with what the future of entertainment looks like? I think we can. I think we're well suited to do it. And so I'm very inspired at the moment as far as what it means to explore our identity as a community and continuing to radically shift the way the world sees things. Again, I was born in the 70s. I'm here to go to the concert and have a beer with my friend and put my arm around him and be like, I love this band. I don't think we need to abandon that. But I think in this particular space, this opens up a world of possibility. So listen, I could talk about this all day and I'll spare you the rest, but there's just all kinds of fun stuff that we wish to explore. And at a moment where literally all of our colleagues nationwide dozens and dozens and dozens of live events have all canceled or postponed. Pygmalion's here to say that we're not canceled. We're not postponed. We're shifting. We're adapting, and we're going to use this space to explore. And if we can't be spelunkers to an extent and see what is in the dark cave by shining some light on it, we're never going to grow. So that's just my impassioned way of saying, as we continue to move through, you know, we'll be excited to learn about, again, thank you so much for being so flexible, because we're scared. And quite frankly, it's not as though we're fortunate to have 16 years to back us up, in a plethora of local sponsors that so far have been very willing to stay on board. Not all, but most. And we're hopeful that the budgets continue to roll in so that we can do that exploratory work together. And so we're scared that we won't be able to continue to move forward if we don't do what we do this year. And so, yeah, again, thank you for the flexibility. And Rachel, we'll find a time to speak further about what it means and how we can keep it safe. I'm so grateful, Ms. Williams, for you bringing that up, because, you know, this pandemic looks differently for everyone. You know, for some people, it's like, I don't care. I'm going to go and do what I want. And that's freedom. And for other people, it's like, no, I can't do that. I don't have the choice. And so we need to be really thoughtful as an organization as to what it means to invite people into an inclusive event when we're actually kind of, in some ways, maybe being exclusive if we do things that aren't going to be available to everyone. So that's all. Look, I thank you so much for giving me some time to speak. I think that what the Public Arts Commission represents is basically everything that is good about and righteous about Urbana. And I love that it exists. I want to see it grow. Like I tell Rachel all the time, and the mayor, I need a zero. I need a zero on that budget. We somehow have big budgets for other things. We need a zero to open it up so that everyone's getting a ton of money to do all kinds of amazing things, educators in particular. So I'm hopeful that that continues to grow in that way. So thanks so much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Seth.
Sure.
Thank you.
One other thing I'll note that's just sort of on that note, you know, we have a lot of really excellent kind of collaborative thought processes that are going to be necessary and possible during this time. We've had, I mean, I've been invited just in this time of isolation to meet with all kinds of different groups time and time again to talk about, like, how are we thinking about the arts and how are we all working together in these different ways. And I know that those things are going to become more and more necessary as we navigate both this pandemic, but this political, this cultural, the historic moment, and then also the other, you know, the whatever aftermath this looks like, you know, and kind of figuring out where do we go from here. I think that's going to be really necessary. We've got a lot of really energetic folks, and I mean, just recently one of our grantees helped tried to sort of pull together a support group for grantees, which I was like, that is awesome. How can I help you? Because, you know, I think that's something that really, you know, can be something that our program helps lead, and, you know, and that's the intention too, and how I hope to, once we have these guidelines more, you know, clear and approved, that I can be then pulling groups together. So not just working one-on-one with grantees, but actually creating Zoom meetings and spaces where people can come and can bounce ideas off of each other, because I think that, you know, we're all thinking about these issues in unique and important ways, and we all have different kinds of wisdom to offer the conversation. And I think that being given center stage, and of course my my end all be all imperative at any time, which is we never work in isolation, and we never you know, we never design something without placing the most marginalized imagination at the center, to understand that we build from there, right? We think first about all the needs that could possibly be, you know, on the table, and then build from there. And we'll meet everybody else's needs as well. And I think that takes a lot of creative brainstorming. So I really hope to create those opportunities for our grantees, for our partners, so that we're also working as a community to really re-envision what's possible in the arts right now and what's possible culturally for Urbana. Any other questions, comments, feedback about this particular agenda item? My proposal as a way forward is going to be circling back to our Tier 3 grantees, inviting them to give me any other written or phone call based or whatever feedback, and then going and working with our city administration to make sure that this feels clear for them as well, and then move forward with disseminating information, support, and creating spaces where people can really brainstorm and get creative together.
Okay, sounds good, Rachel.
Thank you.
Okay, unless anybody has anything else they want to mention, I think we don't have any new business, so I think that wraps up the meeting. Therefore, we're adjourned.